we're now going to dive into iOS 12 and Siri Kit. And this has expanded a lot from what we've seen last year. Siri has gotten that much more powerful. And the big thing here is shortcuts. Shortcuts allow people to give a custom name to something that they want to have happen. And it can just sort of magically happen if you change a custom thing on Siri to say, order my favorite coffee, and you've got a Starbucks app that can handle this. Like it'll say, you know, if you say order my favorite coffee, it goes through the whole process of checking your location, putting in the order, and all that good stuff. And so there's a couple of ways that we can do this. There's a simple side to things and a more complex side. We're going to be looking at both. But in order to go check this out, let's go ahead and fire up Xcode. So let's go ahead and create a new project. And let's just create a single view application here. And we're going to make a really simple app that basically just shows off a color. And the color I'm going to pick here is red. So I'm just going to have this be called the Show Red app. I know, extremely simple here, but I want you to get the concepts. And so we're going to focus on the Siri side of things here, not the UI at all. But just go ahead. Everything here should be normal as usual, Swift. We don't need any of these things. So we'll just go ahead and create this. I'm going to throw this on my desktop. Okay, and the first thing that we need to talk about is when you're going to add something that can be created into a shortcut by Siri. There's two ways to do this. You can either do it through NS user activity, or you can do it through intents. And so first let's dive into NS user activities, because these are much simpler. Now step number one is you need to go into your info.plist and specify that you're going to have the ability to use this NS user activity. So we're going to add a new item here, hit the plus button. Now what we need to go ahead and enter into here, there's no autocomplete unfortunately, but just capital NS and then user, capital activity, okay, and then capital types. Needs to be exactly that with the exact same spelling. NS user activity types. Make sure you got the correct spelling, the correct capitalization. Again, unfortunately, there's no autocomplete there, but once you have that in place, you have to specify that this is going to be an array. So let's change this to array. Then when you have that, you have to hit this arrow so it's now pointing down, then hit the plus button. And we want to add a new string here. And the string that we want to add is the name of our new user activity. So you got to have it be up to the same bundle identifier that you have. So copy whatever your bundle identifier is, go back, paste that in, but then you need to say dot and then give a name for your activity. So I'll maybe just call this show red via activity. Okay. So we've got our show red via activity. It's important that you have this copied so that you'll be ready to paste it inside of your app. Then what you do is you usually have user activities that are tied with a particular view controller. So we only have one view control on our app, so we'll go ahead and just use it here. First thing is I want to set the background color to be red. That's the big distinguishing feature of our app, so I'll go ahead and do that. But then next comes the ability to create a user activity. So first let's create an activity. I'm just going to call mine act, but this is going to be equal to a new NS user activity. And we'll do our little opening parentheses here, and we want to specify the activity type. Now this should be what you have copied, so do double quotes and then paste in whatever you've got. In my case, it's com.zappycode.showred via activity. I know, a mouthful, right? But whatever yours is, make sure you've gone ahead and pasted that. Next, we have to specify a few options here. So first, is eligible for search. This has got to be equal to true. So this is saying it can show up in your search results. The next is we want to make sure that this can be used via Siri. So we're going to say is eligible, and we want to do for prediction. Set that equal to true. You could, if you want to, go ahead and say this is eligible for handoff, but that's true by default, so you don't necessarily have to go specify that. The next thing that you want to do is you want to give a title to that. So I'm just going to get our activity, and I'm going to say title, and I'm going to set this equal to something like show red. Okay, so we've got that in place. The next thing that we want to do is you can pass in some user info. We won't really need any user info here, but if we just get our activity and say user info, we can pass it any sort of dictionary. So if we wanted to, let's do something like my number and specify some random number that we're passing through. Again, we don't have a use for it in this app, but that could be something that's going to help get your view controller to the proper state that it needs to be. Now, with this, you can specify a specific phrase that you want to have happen when someone is going to be using this particular shortcut. The user has to create their own specific name for it, but you could have a suggested name. But in order to do this, there is something that we have to import here. So, and there's actually a couple that we're going to end up throwing in here. The first is let's import intents. Then we need to import core spotlight. I need to say import force first, import core spotlight. There we go. And we also need to import core services. Okay, so make sure you got those three in there. We're going to end up using things from each of them. So once you've done that, then we can say activity dot, and then we want to do suggested invocation phrase. So again, this won't be what the user is going to say, but we can, it's sort of a little help for the user. So maybe we'll call this something like show me the red exclamation point. Okay, again, the user can specify what that's going to be, but we want to get them started in the right direction. Next, we need to specify some things for how this is going to show up in our search. So we're going to make a new attribute here, and I'm just going to do ATTR for short, but this should be of type CS searchable. And again, if you're not getting this, it's because you didn't import the stuff at the top, but we need CS searchable item attribute set. Yes, I know that's a lot, but CS searchable item attribute set. We're going to open this up, and we want the initializer with item content type. As far as type goes here, we're just going to do lowercase k, and then capital UT type, and then the type that we want to specify here is item. So we'll scroll down. I guess I can start typing. That'll get me there quicker. Specify that this is going to be a string. Next thing that we need to do is we need to have an image. So I have a little image on my desktop that I'm going to have showing up here. It's this little mobile phone. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, come back into the app. Really doesn't matter what image you have. In fact, you could do a nil image, but it's going to make it look that much better. And I'm just going to say let image be equal to a UI image. And let's do one named something, and I'll pass in that string. Now this gives us back an optional, so I'm just going to do a little exclamation point. I know this isn't the safest code, but we're just trying to pound through an example here. Next thing that we're going to do is with our attribute on that, we're going to say dot thumbnail data, and you'll see it's looking for type data. So on this, we're going to say image dot PNG data, just like that. Okay. With all of that in place, then we can set a description for this attribute dot description. We could maybe say something like show the red app. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our activity that we created earlier, and we're going to say activity dot content attribute set, and have that be equal to this attribute that we just created here. Okay. Oh, and the name for this is not description, it's content description. There we go. Okay, now with all of this in place, we have our activity, then we made this attribute set, we've added that to the activity. Now we have to get the activity connected with the view controller. So we're going to say self.user activity and set that equal to our act that we just created. Okay, so this is sort of the simplest version of what it is that we're trying to do. So let's go ahead, and first you've got to run your app. You just got to run your app so that this code can get loaded. Essentially what this does is it makes it so that then this is going to be something that can be added as a shortcut. Okay, so we'll go ahead and run this on the simulator here. Okay, and we'll wait just a second here for the simulator to show up. There we go. So we should see that nice big red background. When we see that, that's when we know that this code has been run. And look at that. There we go. It's showing up there. So if this is the case, we should be able to see the show red thing inside of our search here. And so if we go ahead and just hit the home button on our device and pull down from the top, look at that. We have a little suggestion here, the show red. And if you go ahead and tap on this, well, that takes you back into the app. How cool is that? And it's important to note that when someone taps on that, you can actually run some code specifically realizing that they came in with this particular piece of code. So in order to do this, we need to add something to our user defaults that says, this is what we're looking for. And so we're going to add a new function here, and the name of this function is going to be application continue user activity restoration handler. So I find it's easiest to find if you do restoration handler. There's really only one function that has that. So again, you should have this application continue user activity restoration handler. Inside of here, the big thing is you want to check out if this is the correct user activity, because you could have multiple. So you want to say if user activity dot activity type and set that equal to something. We got to do the 2 equal sign here, but say, equal to, and this should be whatever we had copy and paste it, except we did the name of that image. So we need to go back. We need to grab this show read via activity thing, come back in, and we'll paste that in. There we go. So if that is the case, this means that, then we can run some code. Maybe let's just print something like came in from activity. Okay. And in this case, this means we were able to successfully handle all of this. So we need to say that this worked out. So we're going to return true. And then outside of here, this is where we'd probably want to return something like false, because that means we weren't able to properly handle whatever user activity it had passed us. Okay. So, let's see. Why is Xcode not happy here? Return false. There we go. All right, so with this in place, let's go ahead and give our app a little bit of a run here. Okay. So again, we should see that nice big red screen. We'll come back, hit the home button. We're going to drag down. If we tap on show red there, look at that. We get printed out came in from activity. So this is where we could handle that. So you're saying we haven't dealt with anything from Siri. What's the case here? Well, these NS user activities really awesome because it kind of shows up in many places throughout iOS. You saw it there in the search, but it's very easy now to add this via Siri. So the way that people create Siri shortcuts is they're going to go to their settings. They're going to scroll down here to Siri. And then there's going to be listed out here the particular user activity shortcut that you've created. Now, there's some bug in the simulator, and I've waited at this screen for about an hour because I just thought, oh, the simulator needs time. It'll come. It didn't come. Then fast forward a day later, all of a sudden, for some reason, when I had opened it up, it was there. So this was one that I had earlier called I like eggs. That was the phrase that I had chosen. It was this activity called come say hello. And like you'll notice, if we're able to tap on this, this is how we can edit this. So I think this is cool. You can change like what name you want to have happen, and that will essentially launch it. But basically what happens here is the user, whatever phrase they choose, like this, I think this is cool, then handles the shortcut or the NS user activity that you just created. And so eventually, oh, look, here it is. See, I have no idea why these show up when they do, but look, here's our show red one. You'll notice when we hit the plus button here, the show me the red, this was that suggested text that we had entered earlier there, right? So the whole idea is that the user gets to pick what it is. So maybe I'll do something close to what the app suggested for me, but I'm going to go a little different here. Show me the red, baby. Okay, so now all of a sudden I have my own custom phrase with this, all right? So now these have been added to Siri so that if I say, show me the red, baby, it's going to go ahead and open up the app here. So let's go ahead and give this a test. Show me the red, baby.
There's no need for that.
Okay, Siri, that's not what I said. I'm not repeating that, but let's try this one more time. Show me the red, baby. You can tell it wants to. It's really thinking about it. This is why Xcode betas are a little bit buggy and don't always work. So I'll give this a little bit longer here, but I had tried this earlier and I never got it to go for me. Yeah, look at that. It quits out there. But that is the full process you want to get through. Hopefully by the time that you're watching this, Apple has worked out the kinks with that. As I said, this is the simple way to be working with the Siri kit to create shortcuts. The other one is via intents. And let me show you real quick how you can get into your intents. And again, because of some drawbacks with the simulator, we're not going to be able to fully test this out, but I want you to see the process. So just know intents are a little bit more extreme. Like they're not going to be as simple as just creating one of these activities for an existing thing. But what's really cool with intents is that you can make it so that someone can ask for something via Siri and it won't have to open up your app. In this previous example, if it had worked, it would have done the same thing of popping up the view controller and showing the red screen and whatnot. But via intents, you can make it all happen in the background. So first thing that we've got to do is we have to say File, New File, and scroll down a bit here. We want to create a Siri Kit intent definition file. So Siri Kit intent definition file. Go ahead and create that. So what's really cool is that Apple had intents in iOS 11 for Siri Kit, and it had to be in a special kind of category. So there was stuff for like money apps, there was stuff for workout apps, but you had to be in one of those categories. Now you can create your own type of intents for whatever your app situation is. So if you just go ahead and click on your intents, intents.intent definition file that you created, hit the plus button, say I want to create a new intent. You got to give it some sort of name here. So I'm going to maybe call mine like show the red, something like that. And here you can kind of specify all the different parameters that you want inside of here. So you can have the kind of term that you want in order to, have the user get things going. So there's toggle, check-in, set, get, download, filter, send, create, add, start, all different sorts of things in here. But let's go ahead and do go. And I'm going to call this maybe something like red screen. So someone could say like go red screen, and we can have some sort of description here. Move to the red screen. All right, you can have images associated with this. You can say whether or not the user has to confirm this. Other things that you can specify here is like what kind of parameters that should be coming through. So in WWDC, they had an awesome example where it was like a soup shop where they wanted to get the order. So they would say, we have an order here, which is going to be an array. And so we're going to have to do, check that it's an array, but it should be an array of like strings, for instance. And this is like all the different type of soups that they want to order. The other thing that they wanted was a location. And so they could say on here that they are looking for a location. So like these are things that should be coming through, because if someone's going to order some soup, it's got to be delivered to them. And so they had shown how like those were going to be the two options. Then you can create the shortcut types here. So this is the intent, and then these are the shortcuts that you can add here. And so you can say, there's different ways that you could handle this. So they were showing if you're ordering soup, ideally someone gives you an order and a location. So in this situation, someone's given you an order and a location. And so it would be something like order, and I guess we should, if you start typing order, you want to get that magical word down there, and you'll see when you click on this, it comes highlighted in blue. So we'll say like order soup, and subtitle send soup to your, and then we'll do location. And I guess we don't want to say your, we'll just say send soup to, and then we'll show the location. And then this is the really important part here, is whether you want to support a background execution. So if this is checked, it'll order all the soup in the background. The user never has to open the app. It's literally just, hey Siri, order me a tomato soup to my house. Right? And by doing that, Siri can understand this was an order, this was the soup location that it's going to the house, and it's those two things all of a sudden you can execute the whole order in the background. Now there's other situations, right? Like what if we only get a location? Well, in this case, we can't do the background support because we've got to know what the order is. And so then we would go through and actually launch the app and get like the order that they want. And the same thing goes for if someone just gives us an order like, hey Siri, order me tomato soup. And then they've got to figure out what the location is. So again, we don't want a background thread on that. But I believe you can have up to 12 different shortcut types here. And by adding all of these, that means then that the user can choose which one they're going to use ultimately in their app. Okay, so once you've gone ahead and created these intents, it's a little bit like core data that, if you ever make something in core data in the background, Apple creates a class for that then you can use throughout your app. It actually makes intents here that you can use. So if you go to your view controller, I'm going to do this here. You can create a new intent. So I'm going to say let intent be equal to, and then if we go back and look at the name of our intent, it's called show the red. I can say here, show the red intent. Isn't that cool? Just do my open and close parentheses. Then on this, I can specify on this intent. You'll see if I do intent dot look, I can specify what a location in an order is. So you might be wondering, well, when would you be making one of these intents? Well, it's whenever someone, if we were doing the soup example, it'd be whenever somebody was ordering some soup, you would do this intent in the background as they were ordering, because it helps train Siri to say, oh, this user is ordering soup quite a bit. Maybe I'll suggest for them to make a shortcut to do this quickly. And so the basic idea is that you should make these intents whenever the user is doing something that you would like a shortcut to happen. So in this case, you would want to specify the order, right? Pass an array of some strings. Also, it would need like a location. So we could say intent dot location, and it's looking for a CL place mark. CL place mark. Let's see if we can create one of these quickly. Looks like not too fast, so maybe we won't specify that in this one. But you can go ahead, set those things, and then what you would want to do is you would want to make an interaction. So we're going to say let interaction be equal to an IN interaction. Okay. And we want to do the initializer where we can pass in an intent. So we'll pass in that intent that we just created. As for the response, we can just go ahead and pass nil there. And then with this interaction, this is where we want to go ahead and say donate, which donate essentially means add this as a potential suggestion. And this is just an error handler here. There's not any sort of special code that you have to run or whatnot, but this is, just in case something happened, you would say like if error is not equal to nil, something like that. You would then, process something and do something so that the user's not all messed up there. But again, there's some major limitations in the beta here. I haven't been able to get past this point with a lot of what I've seen in the software. And you're getting to some pretty intense territory. So I would definitely recommend doing the user activity, because there's probably a lot of situations in which you'd want that outside of SiriKit, as you saw in the search that'll show up, or if you're going to do handoff between like a Mac app and your iOS app, that would be a good situation for that. And if you want to go a step further, this code here to get you into the intents with, setting up your own intent here and then being able to add it into your code, this will get you most of the way. It's really just from here being able to handle that intent and getting it to show up correctly. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed learning about SiriKit. Awesome stuff that Apple has brought to us. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments.